of hemp makes 20 barrels of oil. No need for pesticides to poison all our soil. People got no food, they got no clothes, they got no rest. Right now, it's time for hemp.
Thank you for taking time for hemp. I'm your host, Casper Leitch. You are listening to Time for Hemp on Tumblr, SoundCloud, iTunes, iHeartRadio, at the timeforhemp.com website, at a website that has our plug-in on their website. Good golly, Miss Molly, we're even on Roku TV, anywhere that there is sound found around. On the internet, we are found around making sound on the internet. Please share us with your friends. It is Thursday. Thursday, we put a spotlight on the hardworking activists in the good old USA. Salute, make America better. Hell yeah. Here in the heartland of the world, as far as we're concerned, we Americans think the whole world does revolve around our dollar. And so we're all excited to put a spotlight on the hardworking activists who make the policies click and pop here in the United States. With my joint host, Paul Stanford. Good morning, Paul.
Good morning, Casper. How are you today?
Fine, thank you. I know you're going to be taking the message of hemp, paper, fiber, and fuel to Japan here in another few weeks, and I know Chris is going to be going over there. Chris Conrad is our joint guest today. He's on talking about his new book and some of his new activities, and he and Paul will be sharing some of the ideas they're going to be going to Japan with. So with that said, I'm going to hush my mouth and pass this joint chat over to my joint host so he and our joint guest can have a good joint conversation here on Time for Hemp. Paul?
Hey, Chris.
Hi, Paul. Great to hear from you. And, I'm really looking forward to this trip to Kyoto. Or Kyoto? I should learn a little Japanese,
Turns out, Kyoto's supposed to be among the most beautiful, well-preserved cities in Japan.
And we're going in one of the rainiest times of year.
Yeah, it should be great. So it's a focus on hemp fuel and fiber with all of these conferences we've had lately that are all cannabis, recreational primarily oriented. It's nice to see an environmental hemp conference again.
That's the way I feel too, and I would say even more so. We've had so many conferences talking about all the economics and opportunities that lie in the cannabis industry, which I believe are completely valid points to be making. But it's nice to see a conversation that gets back from how many 1,000-watt lamps do you need to fit in a warehouse to get rich, and change it instead to how do we reverse global warming by using cannabis and hemp as an industry.
Yeah, that's really what it's all about. I really think energy is the key here, and biodiesel fuel. If we can produce high THC cannabis, which is much more productive for seeds and therefore oil and protein, I think that could have a huge impact on the whole clean energy movement.
Yeah, exactly. And this conference has been put together, and I feel really honored that they've chosen the name of my book, Hemp, Lifeline to the Future, my first book that I wrote back in '93, as the name of this particular conference. But now this is a whole series of conferences, right? Am I understanding that right? This is not just a one-shot deal.
I think they want to make this the first of a series of conferences. I believe that's the case. I haven't been following all the voluminous communications that seem to come out of these, the process. But I'm sure they're planning on at least an annual event. Are they doing something more?
Yeah, I don't know that there's a series of events here. It's that they want to make this annual and have these regularly. So that's exciting. And of course, one of the reasons that Japan, and you might be more involved with, as you mentioned, the volume of literature that comes out about this. I can't keep up with it either. But it had to do with the whole phytoremediation of toxins that have been left over as a result of the meltdown at Fukushima and other things like that. And so Japan is a country that not only does it not have an oil supply and needs to have biofuels, not only does it have the same pollution, in fact, probably worse there because they're closer to China, which produces so much of the world's pollution. But in addition, they had this additional need of their environment having been totally screwed up by that nuclear release. How many years ago? That's 5 years ago? 6?
Yeah, 5 years ago. That huge tsunami that wiped out the Fukushima power plant continues to pour radiation into the ocean, and apparently it's still melting down into the earth somewhere in the groundwater.
And I haven't. I know that there was some work done in Russia to try to use cannabis to phytoremediate nuclear waste from the meltdown in Chernobyl many years back. One of the things I'm not clear on, though, and maybe you can answer this to me, is if they do soak up the radiation into the hemp, what is the plan to do with that hemp? Because it seems like the radiation is still around. Do you know what the plan is after that?
I do not. I can't claim to be an expert on phytoremediation. It's something I've heard about. We've heard that cannabis absorbs heavy metals, but I haven't ever really seen the science regarding that, actually, or pursued that. I mean, obviously, if it's in the plant has to go somewhere too.
Right, and that's why
radiation, once it's there, it takes a long time to decay.
Right,
so
and
I'm not sure exactly that I know. Nair Hardin has been a powerful advocate of that, and maybe we should look into that science a little bit more.
Yeah, well, that's why it's so exciting to me, because as you know, it was like almost 30 years ago that we started to really. Now, you guys were onto it earlier. I think you had a hemp initiative up in Oregon in '86 or something like that. But for California, really, hemp became an issue starting around 1988, 89, in that time frame. And so by what time I wrote my book in '93, I was talking about using hemp for phytoremediation to get mercury out of the soil and things like that, which they're heavy medical toxins that you don't want where you're growing your potatoes, obviously, because you don't want people getting sick with it. But nonetheless, with something like that, it absorbs into the fiber of the plant. As long as you don't consume that, you're not going to get the mercury exposure, and it's going to be so tiny, the amount that you might even encounter in the fiber, that you could wear clothes like that and it wouldn't be a problem, and the disposal distributes it further. But radiation is something I'm really looking forward to seeing how they plan to capture. I understand, though, that it has something to do with the same process that they use for making the hempcrete, meaning that they use other minerals that then can absorb the radiation or whatever, or can block the radiation. But I'm really looking forward to seeing what the science is that they've developed in that regard, because I know that we're in a major crisis globally, and that's what this is. It's actually a global conference. How long have you been involved with the conference at this point?
Well, I remember first talking about it maybe 6 months ago, when Nair Hardin and Takashi in Japan, who's been a long-time hemp activist there, started emailing me, and I showed an interest, and so.
But now you're sponsoring it, right? Or are you a sponsor of it?
Yeah, I'm one of the sponsors, but our medical
stuff.
clinics are here in the United States, and our campaign for the restoration and regulation of hemp. But
I gotcha.
It's still just coming together, even though it's only about 6 weeks out now.
Well, one of the things that came together recently, though, is that Mr. Abe, the Prime Minister's, his wife is going to be at the conference and giving the keynote speech. That was quite an accomplishment. Do you know what she's done in terms of hemp previously, by any chance?
Well, she's come out as an advocate for hemp. Hemp is integral to traditional Japanese culture, and the Abes have been trying to advocate the restoration of more traditional Japanese cultural practices, I guess you'd say. And the Chinese have complained that Shinzo Abe, the Prime Minister of Japan, has gone to Shinto shrines that had been last visited by a head of state during World War II. And so Shinto, the native religion of Japan, or the gateway to heaven, I think is the literal translation, is has used hemp in all of its manifestations, from the fiber for the clothing and the accoutrements at the temples of Shinto shrines. And so hemp has been an integral part of their spiritual practices for centuries. And so that's part of the reason, I believe, that the Prime Minister's wife, Akie Abe, if I'm pronouncing that correctly, has advocated hemp quite publicly for its environmental benefits for making paper and fabric.
And now, I remember from my own research that hemp is used in the transition of power to a new emperor as part of the ceremony of bringing in a new emperor, that they use hemp seeds, and that the sumo wrestlers, I don't know if they still do, but traditionally there's been a hemp belt that the winner of a sumo wrestling competition would get. I don't know how much hemp they're even growing in Japan at this point. But I found one of the things quite interesting, what we were just talking about there, Paul, is that they don't want to actually talk about, you were talking about high THC hemp seeds because of some of the advantages they might have in terms of productivity of oil and things like that, and natural protections. But that's something that they said they don't want to talk about actually at all at this event, right? I mean, maybe in terms of the fiber, but they're not at a point where they're ready to talk about medical marijuana or recreational use. Or is that your understanding as well?
No, you're exactly right. It was Douglas MacArthur upon the conquest of Japan at World War II that prohibited cannabis, and so the laws against it have been in place, only since 1945. But the Japanese people in general are very conformist, so they accepted that law, and it's become part of their culture now. But they do want to grow their own indigenous Japanese varieties, and those aren't the traditional super low THC varieties that have been bred specifically to pretty much breed out the seed by breeding out the flower. So the Japanese varieties, I can't say exactly what their THC content is, but I don't think they have ever implemented a THC limit in their seed and fiber varieties.
Oh,
I'd be interested to see what their THC level was.
Now, are they going to be avoiding?
I think if you have bigger flowers, you're going to have more THC, and consequently, you're going to have more seeds from bigger flowers. And so, in terms of seed productivity, and hemp seed protein has been an important food for so many different cultures, including the Japanese one. It'd be real interesting to know what the THC content is of their hemp. I know they have allowed the cultivation of hemp by these cultural treasures, I think they term them, these people who still carry on the old practices of making hemp paper and hemp cloth, are among the people who receive a stipend from the Japanese government for carrying on these traditions that might not be economically viable without that sort of support.
I wish our government would give me a stipend to grow some weed and make stuff out of it. I use the word weed a little disparagingly, of course. We're really talking about the world's premier sustainable bio fuel and other resource crop. So, do you know, is the issue of CBD, the non-psychoactive T8 component in medical marijuana, is that something that's also a little taboo at this event, or are people going to be talking about that side of it? Is it just the THC side that they're concerned about, or they just don't want any connection except for the industrial?
I think it's the drug side in general. I think the drug side in general is something that they, and again, I haven't been following all of the voluminous emails and messages that are going back and forth on this, but I don't think they want to address the medical aspects, and that probably includes CBD. They're trying to focus on the the fuel, fiber, and food aspects of cannabis.
And with your experience as a global traveler in pursuit of hemp, you understand how important it is to respect the cultural requisites of a society like Japan. You don't just go in there and say, well, you guys, you should think the way we are because, we know it all and we're all Americans, blah, blah. So this is something that we're probably decades away from them being able to have the same conversation that we normally have on the Time for Hemp radio broadcast network.
Probably so. I know, if you're arrested with just a small amount of marijuana in Japan, you're going to spend a lot of time in jail. And so it's a taboo subject. It's in the closet. People have a different social structure there. I know one American who was arrested with a few grams of marijuana in Japan. He was working for Time magazine as a translator. He was in jail for about 6 months, and when he was released, the police went to all of his neighbors and told them they had to make reports on him to them. And so that's the kind of social structure they have there, something that, our idea of privacy and freedom of thought generally would disdain from. In Japan, they have these social constrictions that can be pretty enormous in terms of their impact on the individual. And therefore, even though, a lot of people probably are using cannabis, it's very well hidden, and the consequences for its use are draconian.
And the fact that it's an island nation makes it difficult to get things in and out of it. It's not like walking across the border here in the United States and Mexico or U.S. and Canada. It's a whole other matter. You got to get a boat. You got to get a boat into a port. You got to get that through the inspections, and you can't just walk in, like I think. So, can you give our listeners I've only seen stuff on Facebook. Is there a website or a Facebook? How do our listeners plug into this event? Because this is in July. I don't think we really talked about this. It's going to be around July the 2nd. You can probably give the exact date better than me. I know it's close to my wife Mickey Norris, and my anniversary, which is July the 2nd. It is July the 2nd.
July the 2nd. And it's a one-day event. I know there's going to be some events at Shinto Shrine there in Kyoto. In terms of a website, I would say just do a Google search on Kyoto Hemp Forum, and that's KYOTO for anyone out there who wants to know how to spell that. And so I don't know if they have their own. I don't know what the URL is. I wasn't prepared to advocate for it. I don't.
I understand.
Well, I know what the URL is, and I want our listeners to pop in and listen to and visit a lot. That's the timeforhemp.com website, where we have an amazing array of content put together by a fantastic group of people, all dedicated to ending prohibition. We're going to come back after this little commercial break, and we're going to listen to a groovy tune about how wonderful marijuana is by Chin, who is a famous singer there in Japan. And then when we come back, we're going to pick up where we left off here at Time for Hemp. Are listening to the Time for Hemp Global Broadcasting Network. Please share us with your friends.
THC THCF Medical Clinics are the premier physicians clinic in the United States. THCF has offices all across the United States from Hawaii to Michigan. THCF Medical Clinics has helped approximately 150,000 patients obtain their medical marijuana permits to legally possess, grow, and use medical marijuana. If you have chronic pain, multiple sclerosis, or any other neurological degenerative disease, or if you have any gastrointestinal disorders such as GERD, irritable bowel syndrome, or if you have AIDS, cancer, spastic disorders, seizure disorders, or glaucoma, call us at 1-800-723-0188 or visit us online at hemp.org. Again, the number is 1-800-723-0188 and the site is hemp.org.
Smoke. That's some wicked high grade or some gum made up and I'm impressed. You want a lick? See the chalice happy burn. Begin happy burn. Turn! Keep the ganja pipe burning. The good sense to me, your man yearning. A ganja man, they put you stiff in the air. And I wear it like you just don't care. When me sing again, keep the ganja pipe burning. The good sense to me, your man yearning. A ganja man, they put you stiff in the air. And I wear it like you just don't care. Turn! Wait there, yes me have to crap it. Say it's a bad habit, but it make me fly like a rocket. Too much of anything will make you an addict. Yes me feel stressed when me no have it. Come on, girl I look good, like play a boy bunny rapid. Yes smell the 250 back me have in me pocket. 2 slip kick on, want me plug in a socket. Under me Guinness and me weak me a walk it yo. Keep the ganja pipe burning. The good sense to me a man yearning. A ganja man they put you stiff in the air. And I wear it like you just don't care. Shiny man I sing, keep the ganja pipe burning. The good sense to me, your man yearning. A ganja man, they put you stiff in the air. And I wear it like you just don't care. Road boy from overseas, we no care, we no matter. This we be get flatter, man a real tapper. Big Mac, double whopper, original showstopper. No say man a no whopper, but can't say man a no shatter. Light up with big head, make it bun down proper. On the time we real root boy used to real chopper. This the king blow, oh, your head pan a platter. Smoke a split and relax, man, you too lapa. Keep the ganja pipe burning. The good sense to me, your man yearning. A ganja man, they put you stiff in the air. And I wear it like you just don't care. Oh, no, if you listen me, keep the ganja pipe burning. The good sense to me, your man yearning. A ganja man, they put you stiff in the air. And I wear it like you just don't care. Raise up the fire, keep it burning. 24/7, 365, we keep it alive. Raise up the fire, keep it burning. 24/7, 365, we keep it alive. When me light up me chalice, say me don't fear no malice. I'm a trouble them gone. When me light up me bang in a Buckingham Palace. Good for every Tom, Dick and Harris. Good for every Michelle and Alice. From London to New York to Paris. Ganja make them feel good and spin like Ferraris. Room. Ballet the Rastafaris. China man a real ganja man. Me now go parry no cigarettes no. Keep the ganja pipe burning. The good sense to me your man yearning. A ganja man they put you stiff in the air. And I wear it like you just don't care. China man a sing. Keep the ganja pipe burning. The good sense to me your man yearning. A ganja man they put you stiff in the air. And I wear it like you just don't care. Blaze up the fire, keep it burning. 24/7, 365, we keep it alive. Blaze up the fire, keep it burning. 24/7, 365, we keep it alive. Keep the ganja pipe burning. The good sense to me, your man yearning. A ganja man, they put you slip in the air. And I wear it like you just don't care. When me sing again, keep the ganja pipe burning. The good sense to me, your man yearning. A ganja man, they put you slip in the air. And I wear it like you just don't care.
Hi, this is Jet Baker, and I always take time for hemp. It's all about information and education. Free hemp video and audio downloads, free music downloads of all the top artists, all the hot artists, and all the interviews with people, the movers and shakers. See what all the buzz is all about. It's time for hemp. That's right. It's time for hemp. Now, here's Casper.
And we are enjoying a joint chat with my joint host, Paul Stanford, and our joint guest, Chris Conrad, here on the Big Joint broadcast. And these two gentlemen were jointly chatting about a book that Chris had jointly worked on with some of his joint friends, I think, and done some joint efforts with his wife. And I'm going to let them get back to their joint talk here at Time for Hemp. Paul?
Hey, so, you know, just momentarily, the people that are putting on the Kyoto Hemp Conference, it's the Japan Hemp Association. That's the English translation. I think that's their URL as well.
Yeah. And they have a very big presence on Facebook, or at least in terms of the number of the conversation threads are huge.
Yeah, that's for sure. So you've got a new book out, Chris. What is it called?
Well, it's I think it's timed really well. It's called The Newbie's Guide to Cannabis and the Industry. And especially with this wave of, we're expecting something like 6 or 8 marijuana legalization initiatives to be on the ballot this year, including a couple of medical ones. So I think the timing is really good for getting people who, not only people who are interested in the industry side, but obviously people who just don't really understand marijuana and cannabis, and including industrial hemp, since we were just talking about that. We have this is a little bit of a spoiler alert, Paul, but when you get to the last chapter, it says that hemp is actually probably the biggest aspect of cannabis of all these business opportunities and benefits we've talked about. That going with industrial hemp probably has the biggest impact. So it's also good timing for this conference, although it goes the opposite way. It talks about marijuana and then goes into hemp, whereas like Hemp Lifeline to the Future, of course, I talked about industrial hemp, and then I got into marijuana. With Hemp for Health, we talked about medical marijuana and worked our way into other things.
Well, can I jump in here for just a minute? Chris, you've gone full circle. You're almost back to doing the BAC, Businessman's Alliance for Commerce and Hemp. I mean, you're almost right back to square one, it sounds like.
It's kind of like that. In fact,
that's what BAC was for, wasn't it? To help businessmen and the business of hemp. That's kind of like, well, anyway, I just couldn't help but notice that.
Yeah, and you're really completely right. And one of the things I feel proud about, having been in this, maybe not as long as Paul Stanford, but for quite a long time, being part of the cannabis movement, is that after I formed the Business Alliance for Commerce and Hemp, that a few years later, I was the first president and a founding member of the Hemp Industries Association, and I think that you were there too, from what I remember, Paul. And that nowadays there's the National Cannabis Industries Association, and that was the gentleman who organized that, Aaron Smith. Actually, he worked for me for a few years before he did that. So in a sense, I've had 2 business associations grow out of my organization, and I know everyone claims credit for the HIA, and and Aaron is one who did the CCIA and the NCIA. But nonetheless, I just feel like it's interesting that the concept that I put together then. And if you look at these initiatives, a lot of them are really based upon the same 4 principles that we put into BAC, and that we wrote the first hemp initiative here in California based upon. And of course, when we talk about the initiative here in California that's on the ballot, well, technically it's not on the ballot, but they've turned in 600,000 signatures and they needed 365. So it's going to be on the ballot. It's also got the 4 principles of industrial hemp, medical marijuana, adult use, and regulated market. So it's been extremely consistent, surprisingly consistent since I first came up with my entry into my gateway, as it were, into the cannabis reform movement, which was the Business Alliance for Commerce and Hemp. And now with this new book, I'm working with Jeremy Daw. He's a writer here in California who's been working with me on other projects. He's the owner of theleafonline.com, which I'm one of the co-founders of. And so it was kind of a natural fit and a flow for us to work together. Because, like I say, the idea of the Newbie's Guide to Cannabis in the Industry is that, there's a lot of people who are just getting into it, but they don't know the basics. And then there's a lot of people who've been involved for a long time, but they don't necessarily know the history or how things got to where they are or the big picture. And so this book is kind of like, it's written for basically anybody. If you know a lot, you're going to get more information out of it. If you don't know that much, we don't presume that you know anything. So once you get into the book, it'll answer your question. We're not going to just assume that you have some basis of knowledge. It's a new introduction to the plant itself and to the industry.
Great. If somebody wants to get a copy, what do they do?
Well, they can go to chrisconrad.com, or I think we're kind of encouraging people to buy from amazon.com just so that we get a little higher ranking up there. We've been sending people all over the place, and maybe you guys have a marketing point of view, but we're thinking right now maybe we should be sending people to Amazon. The one downside of that is, as you probably know, Paul, is that they give a discount on Amazon that we can't afford to give people.
Well, I have a question, and it's an honest question. It might sound mean, and it's not meant to be that way at all. But, Jack Hare's book was an introduction to hemp, and it's kind of like what you talked about. So, like, how much different from your book is your book from Jack's book, or is it like Jack's book? Is it like a companion piece, maybe, or what?
Well, Paul can speak to some of the earlier editions. The edition that I designed and edited was the 1990 edition, and it was written. Well, first off,
first real editor, I think, of Jack's book. Before that, was Ellen Kopp working on it before that?
No, she got involved
after you.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, you made it into a book. Really, before that, it was more like a newsprint clip art thing, almost. I don't want to insult it or anything, but
Jack's book was an
a wealth of information. But it slowly, I watched its evolution from an article, the CMI white paper, which is basically, a couple thousand words with some art, and it was published in the Yippie newspaper Overthrow, into a little newsletter, and then a bound book, and then, but once you became the editor, it became a lot more organized, like a traditional book.
Yeah, and
was probably like the second or third edition at that point.
I would say the third edition that I know of. There was a newspaper edition, then there was one that was kind of like a
white cover one.
It had a white cover, but it was kind of like a scrapbook.
And those both came out pretty close to each other in 1985 and 86.
And then when I saw that one, I saw exactly what you said. I saw that I could organize it in a way that would then and explain what the emperor had to do with anything. The emperor wears no clothes, because Jack didn't really explain that in the book and things like that. So I took the book and made it into an organized piece of information with a political agenda, which my Bach agenda was built into that book at that point. But Casper is really right. I feel like in a way, like all my books have been intros to cannabis, and so but it has to do with the fact that two things. The first is that more and more people are interested. And the other thing is that, like, when I worked on the Emperor back in 90 up through 94, I think was the last one that I worked on. But up to that point, we didn't even know about the endocannabinoid system. We didn't, even know how the receptors worked and so forth. CBD. In fact, I don't know if we even mentioned CBD in the Emperor, but I know that when I got the Hemp Lifeline to the Future and Hemp for Health, by that point, I was advocating for CBD and getting, as I like to point out, getting shat upon for doing so, because people were saying, no, don't talk about CBD. It'll make people not interested in high THC medical marijuana. And other people saying, no, don't talk about medicine in industrial hemp, because we're saying industrial hemp is not a drug. And of course, I took the position that you do, Paul, which is that you just have to embrace the whole plant and be honest about it. Because anytime you try to deny some part of it, and this is kind of in a way what we run into with Japan, when you try to deny some part of it, it makes it hard to explain the rest of it. If you embrace the entirety of the plant, it all makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, well, the thing people have to realize is that, hemp was, it's the oldest crop. It was first domesticated at least 12,000 years ago, and maybe 25 or 35,000 years ago. And we have evolved with cannabis, and cannabis has co-evolved with us. It's changed us, and we did. just look at the dog as another example of the changes inherent in domestication. You know, dogs were probably domesticated about the same time as cannabis was, 25 or 30,000 years ago. And then we had the wolf, which in the Latin term is Canis lupus.
Correct.
And there's those words are related in Latin with that whole cana root. But Canis lupus is the name of the wolf. All dogs today are known as Canis lupus familiaris, whether you're talking about a Chihuahua, or Pomeranian, or a Rottweiler, or Irish Wolfhound. And so you can just see the huge differences there in the in selective breeding over that period of time. And now cannabis's protein profile from its seed completely matches the 8 essential amino acids that humans need for nutrition. And then the essential fatty acid profile of linoleic acids, omega-3s and 6s and 9s, perfectly matches humans' essential fatty acid needs. So this plant has been cultivated to fulfill many different purposes over the past 25, 30,000 years. And that includes the medicinal purposes as well. So do we know what the original plant that was cultivated, in Central Asia those many millennia ago looked like exactly compared to the original? I don't think right now we do, but you can look at horses, you can look at dogs, you can look at other plants that have been domesticated for much shorter periods of time and see huge changes in that domestication process. And today, it's the oldest crop and the most productive crop for fuel, fiber, food, and medicine. So I'll get off my soapbox.
Yeah, and to see the reverse of that, I'd say if you look at pigs, you have a domestic pig. If they go feral, they turn into these really raucous boars in a few generations. Even the same animal can change its appearance and teeth just by when it stops being domesticated by people and goes wild.
Well, and speaking of pigs and boars, I want to remind people to make sure you're registered to vote. Get out there and vote for your politicians. All those pigs and boars need your vote this year. With that said, we're going to take a commercial.
You are listening to the Time for Hemp Global Broadcasting Network. The only broadcasting network dedicated to ending the global war on drugs on iHeartRadio.
Cannabis and sativa seeds. Serious Seeds are the creators of legendary strains like AK-47, Bubblegum, Chronic, Cali Mist, and White Russian. The AK-47 is probably the most awarded strain on the planet. The high THC content of AK-47 makes it the perfect medical strain for patients seeking quick pain relief. Cali Mist is an almost pure sativa. Female medical cannabis patients have reported that this strain helps relieve menstrual cramps. Serious Seeds just acquired another Dutch high-quality seed bank, Magus Genetics. From now on, Serious Seeds can offer you even more award-winning strains. The fine folks at Serious Seeds strive to breed the best cannabis genetics that they can find, so patients can rely on the effectiveness of their medicine. Go to SeriousSeeds.com to grow your medicine. That site again is SeriousSeeds.com.
Puff, puff, give. Share and live. Puff, puff, give. Puff,
Yes, stay alert with consciousness. Realize that your freedom stops at the end of your nose, at the end of your fingertips. Be respectful of the world around you. And we won't in any way ever need a nanny state like we have fallen into. I guess a nanny state's a polite way of saying a police state where they can come to your door and kick it in, and 40 people can come rushing in through the front door all dressed in black, unannounced. You have no idea if they're gang members or if they're federal gang members, and they can kill your dog, tear up your house, and then go, oh, I'm sorry, this was the wrong address, and leave. With that said, I pass this to my joint host and my joint guest here at Time for Hemp.
Hey, Chris, so the California initiative is on the cusp of qualifying. They've turned in almost 100% more signatures than they need to qualify. Isn't that right?
That is right, and we're just waiting for the Secretary of State to acknowledge that fact. But we've got the signatures in there, and these were one of the things that was really different about this campaign, Paul, is that normally we've worked with a volunteer signature gathering campaign. But these guys, they didn't want to even take a chance with that. They just went straight with pros. If you're an activist, you could join and become a signature gatherer, but they weren't soliciting the activists. And some people were put off a little bit by that. In fact, it was hard to find where to sign an initiative. I signed one in Mendocino. I think my wife signed one actually nearby in our neighborhood. But most people we know, they didn't even see an initiative. These guys were so efficient. They just went out, got the signatures, and turned them in, by golly. And it was a great, when they turned him in, it was really great because we had the California Lieutenant Governor Gavin Newsom speak, and he was quite eloquent about the importance of passing this initiative. We had the head of the NAACP in California, Alice Huffman, speaking about it. Of course, we had people from Law Enforcement Against Prohibition, and we had one of our advocates here in California, one of our strongest advocates, in fact, is a Southern California Republican congressman, and he was up there. Yeah, Dana Rohrabacher. So we had, the far left liberal lieutenant governor, the far right conservative Congressman Rohrabacher, and the NAACP and the Medical Association, California Medical Association. So they're very much going for a mainstream campaign as opposed to a tie-dye campaign, one might say.
Yeah, that's probably a good idea.
Well, it is and it isn't.
If you got
because
the resources to do it that way, that's the best way to do it.
Yeah. On the other hand, though, it's kind of created this a little bit of a rebellion at the grassroots level, where people feel like that somehow they're supposed to be running the show, and these the people behind this campaign looked at it a little differently. Here in California, we've been very splintered since at least 2010, when Richard Lee put the Proposition 19 on the ballot. And
you lost a lot up in the Emerald Triangle area, right?
Actually, we lost
the prime marijuana growing areas of the state.
That's really quite interesting because, we lost there almost the same level as we lost statewide. It's basically what it was. People thought it was a for sure win of it. But actually, I've been talking to some people up there. Not only did a lot of the growers and so support us, but the other thing that was going on then was that the federal government, this was during 2010, the big federal crackdown. And so Eric Holder came out and he threatened to arrest any state officials who worked on the on the marijuana legalization program. He threatened to shut down newspapers if they carried advertisements for legal marijuana. And they began systematically doing aerial surveillance of the entire Northern California, where they would bring media and they fly over the medical marijuana gardens in Northern California to show the news media how out of control it is out here. And when I say out of control, I'm putting that in air quotes, that this is what the administration was saying. Some people would agree with that, but nonetheless, that was what they were doing. So, and then there were a lot of fights going on about local zoning up in that part of the state. And they had a program where you could register with the county of Mendocino and be left alone for growing medical marijuana. And so the feds were trying to get that information. So, the context wasn't just a matter of there's this initiative and we're hippies and we don't want to have regulations. There was a very complicated situation going in Northern California, mainly being driven by the federal government to scare people. And so when you look at those numbers, they don't really, you have to take it with a grain of salt about what the actual context was when those incidents were happening. Now, right now, we're not expecting that, because one of the things that's just to go down some of the list of things that's happened since then, is that we've got Colorado having legalized, and Washington, after that we got the Cole memo, where the federal government said if you follow they're looking beyond certain parameters, like as long as there's no out-of-state shipments, and you know what those guidelines are, because shortly after that, Oregon and Alaska legalized. And so I imagine your laws were written to conform with the federal policy as well. But what the authors of this initiative, they looked at all the different initiatives that were out there. They looked at what the federal government has said. They looked at what they saw working and not working in places like Colorado. The price was too high. They didn't determine what a dose of edibles were, and there was a number of incidents of people consuming way too much edibles and things like that. Washington, of course, they didn't protect the medical marijuana program. They didn't, and they put a per se limit, and the taxes went even higher. So we learned from that: don't put the taxes so high. Don't allow for per se driving under the influence, and we can explain that more if the listeners don't know what that means. And make sure medical marijuana is protected. And then we saw what happened up in you guys. You have probably the best law right now, and if you don't mind my saying so, in Oregon. But even up there, you didn't allow for on-site consumption. And so we've added that to our law here. So I would say they learned very much from what they saw happen, and they've written an initiative that not only does it meet all this, but it meets with the more conservative parts of the state who want more control, by doing things like not allowing people to drive under the well, it doesn't say you can't drive under the influence. It says that you can't have an open container. You can't be smoking in the car when you're driving. You have to pull over and smoke. Things like that, those kind of regulations that they put in there. But it's really quite a good initiative. And some of the most important aspects of it are that it's retroactive. It legalizes an ounce of bud, 8 grams of concentrate, 6 plants per household to be grown. And the local governments can no longer ban that once this is passed. They can't ban home grows, which is currently not true for medical marijuana. They are banning home grows all over the state. And then it creates this regulated industry that it favors the small growers. It's actually designed to transition from our current gray market into a lawful market over a period of 5 years to keep out big businesses, to make sure that the people who've been paying with their blood, sweat, and tears to make this industry develop don't get left out of the initial process. And then the taxes, which are relatively low compared to other states, are being used for different things like bringing people, keeping youth in school, helping communities that have been harmed by the drug war in particular, and things like that, which I think are of great benefit. But as I mentioned, one of the critical points is that it's retroactive on all these rights. It downgrades the current penalties. It gets rid of almost every felony is now converted down to either wobbler or a misdemeanor or even completely legal or just a ticketable offense. It releases people from prison. It expunges records, and it sets up a program where if you're under 18, you cannot get jail time anymore for marijuana. And when you turn 18, your record will be cleaned, and people are not going to be damaged for the rest of their lives with that label of a drug user. So, this is some really big stuff. Oh, the other thing I should really mention, it stops cops from searching people. And working in the courts, one thing I've noticed is almost every case starts with somebody getting searched. And so if this stops the searches, it's going to stop the whole case.
Well, that sounds pretty ideal.
Well, a lot of people feel it's not ideal because of a few different things, like the fact that it does it protects the medical marijuana program, but people are afraid of that. But in reality, it really does protect it. But some people are concerned that it does have regulations. They don't want any regulations. They're concerned that it does have taxes, and they don't want any taxes. But we try to explain that society is probably not going to pass a law like that. It might happen, but I just don't see it.
Well, the other thing is that California's initiative law is a little bit more strict than, say, ours in Oregon. In Oregon, the legislature can change initiatives at the legislative session, and in fact they did do that. And usually if we don't like the changes, we can do a referendum to stop those from taking place. But the legislature declared a legislative emergency on some of their changes, which meant that you couldn't do a referendum. They went into effect right away. But California, they can't change that initiative without going back to a vote of the people. Isn't that right?
Actually, that's the case if you don't allow for it. But this initiative, what it did instead is it creates parameters. The legislature can reduce penalties They can legalize more things. They cannot make it illegal. They cannot. It takes a 2/3 vote for them to raise the taxes, but they can actually reduce them as a matter of policy, because if they feel that the tax is too high and it's encouraging the illicit market, they're supposed to reduce the tax.
And the tax level is at 15% on that, right?
That's correct. But then there's a production tax, which is roughly $150 per pound of processed bud and $40 per pound of shake. But now it doesn't really define where goes from being shake to bud. You know what I mean? So I think there's a little opening there, and actually it allows for additional legislation, or not legislation, but additional categories, so they could make levels of shake. Because we both know that there's shake, and then there's trim, and then there's bud, and it's not just one homogeneous thing.
It's a continuum depending on processing. But up in Washington State and here in Oregon, we're seeing prices now that are at and below $1 a gram for the wholesaler of flowers and buds, and that's probably going to keep going down. And then the price of shake is basically $50 to $100 a pound as well. So the prices are already pretty low. So at that stage, then taxes become high. But if the legislature can lower them, it's unlikely they'll do that very quickly if they do that. But
right, and
that's definitely beneficial.
One of the things
we start with a higher tax of 25% in Oregon, so 15%. Definitely better than that.
Right. Really, and the production tax adds like 30 cents per gram of bud. And here in California, people are selling the grams for like $15. So adding another 30 cents, they're saying it's going to double the price. It's like 30 cents is not doubling $15. It's kind of hard to do that. And we're really excited right now.
In Washington, like I said, they're getting $1 a gram. The growers are right now, and it's selling for $10 to $20 a gram in the store.
That doesn't make sense to me. But
it's not the growers who are making the money.
That's a weird thing, isn't it? Because we've seen that in California too. It went from $5,000 a pound in the early '90s to under $2,000 a pound now. Yet the price per gram at the shops has barely budged. So, but one of the things with this initiative, though, is that they found that voters around the state, one of their concerns is they don't want it to become so cheap that teenagers can get hold of it easily. And so, part of the idea with this is to keep the price up high enough that it controls the market. Whereas somebody like myself, I'm planning on growing my own, and we can go and give it away. Right. So that's what I'm expecting. I'm not going to spend that much time in the shops myself. But one of our big excitement right now actually is that Democratic presidential candidate Bernie Sanders came out and supported the initiative yesterday in California. He in Vallejo, California, just a few miles from here, he came out and said that if he was a California citizen, he would vote yes on this initiative. So, this is a nice boost for us right now. We're feeling the burn both ways.
All right. Well, that's great.
Well, speaking of the burn, we have burned an hour quickly going through this wonderful conversation and getting great information to our audience. And it's now time to give a shout out to your favorite URLs and or organizations that you would like to put a spotlight on, starting with our joint guest, Chris.
Yeah, I would say come to chrisconrad.com. You can learn about the initiative and learn about the book and learn about lots of things about California law and so forth. If you like the news, go to theleafonline.com. That's our news service with Jeremy Daw. And the other thing I would say is if you're interested in the initiative, go to AUMA 2016. That stands for the Adult Use of Marijuana Act, ALMA2016.com, and you can become a friend of the initiative, and we're looking for people who want to give this an endorsement and who want to learn more about it. So thank you for this opportunity. It's great to talk to you guys again.
And I take it you're going to be bringing your show back to the Time for Hemp network here in another week or so. Is that right?
Absolutely. We want to make sure people get a chance to find out all the exciting stuff that's going here in California. So we've had a bit of a hiatus, but I think we're moving back into the Time for Hemp. It's about time for hemp.
It is. And Paul?
Our longtime website, crrh.org. That's crrh.org.
And, of course, there's that great show that we do called Cannabis Common Sense that Paul started, I think, 3 years after, George Washington was sworn in, right?
We're on our 20th year now. October will make 20 years and about 850 shows.
Wow, that is a large library. And
I totally honor you guys for all this work, man.
Well, we're getting along on the tooth, and we're glad to be still here to see what we're hoping to be the end of Prohibition. We're about halfway there, just about halfway there. And with that said, we need to have you at home who's listening to this to share this information with your friends. Let them know about this network. Let them know how important it is to end Prohibition. And remember, anytime you hear me, you'll know that it's time for hemp.
Look at all that money, the money that they spend. Take another look and spend some time for hemp. Don't cut trees for paper, 'cause it hurts the environment. Stop deforestation, yes.
You are listening to the Time for Hemp Global Broadcasting Network. Please share us with your friends.
Now, when it comes to medical marijuana, I have more of a practical view than anything else. I mean, my attitude is that if it's an issue of doctors prescribing medical marijuana as a treatment for glaucoma or as a cancer treatment, I think that should be appropriate, because there really is no difference between that and a doctor prescribing morphine or anything else. I think there are legitimate concerns in not wanting to allow people to grow their own or start setting up mom and pop shops, because at that point it becomes fairly difficult to regulate. And again, I'm not familiar with all the details of the initiative that was passed and what safeguards there were in place, but I think the basic concept that using medical marijuana in the same way with the same controls as other drugs prescribed by doctors, I think that's entirely appropriate.
This may sound strange, but I want to pay taxes. See, I don't drink alcohol or smoke cigarettes. I relax with something science has proven is much safer, marijuana. And I want to buy it somewhere that charges taxes to pay for schools and roads, just like alcohol and tobacco. What do you think should profit? Are schools and roads or drug dealers?
Visit the Marijuana Policy Project Foundation at joinmpp.org or call 1-877-JOIN-MPP.
Education and information. See what all the buzz is all about. It's time for hemp. It's time for hemp.